We're good to go.
Okay, so like Luann said, Beth and I put this presentation together for you, and at any time you are free to reach out to either one of us and ask some more specific individual questions that you might have. Okay. So Kentucky Protection and Advocacy is part of, it's a federal mandate that every state have a protection and advocacy. And so Kentucky PNA is the one for Kentucky. All of them don't necessarily have a link to state government, but we are one of the few PNAs that are left that still do currently. So the whole design of PNA was started from an investigative report done by Geraldo Rivera and his investigative reporting that exposed abuse, neglect, and a lack of programming at an institution called Willowbrook. It was a state institution for intellectual disabilities on Staten Island. And so the two links that we have there, one is from Rooted in Rights, and it just gives an overview of the PNA system that I think is really good. And then the second one is some of the footage from Geraldo's actual reporting. So it doesn't matter which one you click on first, Luann, but go ahead and click on one of those links. You're muted.
I have to change and share a different screen for this.
Oh, okay.
Here we go. Sorry.
That's okay. I appreciate the support.
Hi, everybody. I'm Geraldo Rivera, and this is my friend Bernard Carabello.
Can everyone
Aside
hear?
from the fact that we're both Latins from Manhattan with mustaches, Bernard and I share something else in common. Half a lifetime ago, back in January 1972, our paths crossed inside a horrible institution for the mentally retarded called the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island. At the time, the largest institution for the retarded in the world. And despite the fact that it was in New York City, it was also one of the worst. Bernard had just turned 21 years old. He had just, when I met him, forced authorities in the institution to sign him out of that wretched place in which he had spent the last 18 years of his life, inside Willowbrook, since the age of 3. He had wasted those years inside that awful place. It was the tragic result of Bernard's being incorrectly diagnosed as mentally retarded, though his actual condition is cerebral palsy. There is nothing wrong with Bernard's brain. But in those dark days, folks, as you probably know far better than I do, the institution, all institutions of its type, were giant catch-alls, kind of warehouses for children with all different kinds of ailments or conditions. If a kid wasn't perfect, places like Willowbrook existed, where they could be sent out of sight, maybe out of mind, certainly out of the house, out of the neighborhood, and out from under the feet of those parents and families. Over the long years since the first Willowbrook exposés, I have learned not to blame parents for what was happening to their children back then. The institution was just what society in those days felt the best alternative for people with developmental disabilities, kind of a theoretically benign warehouse where their care could be mass-produced and they could live out their almost certainly shortened lives. That system went along benefiting from a conspiracy, I think, of silence, a conspiracy of silence among the states, the families, the staffs of the various institutions, and the media for decades. Then in the 1960s, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, whose own sister Rosemary, as you recall, was retarded, visited Willowbrook as a senator from the great state of New York. Senator Kennedy was appalled by the horrifying conditions he saw. He called it at the time a snake pit. But still, the boys, the girls, the men and women inside, the inmates of Willowbrook, languished in conditions that were more reminiscent of a concentration camp or a kennel than a hospital. Before I go any further, for the benefit of the younger members of our audience, I'd like you to see what they saw back in 1972. What they saw that forced them really to deal with the situation that we're looking at. Let's flash back 33 years.
Well, I visited the State Institution for the Mentally Retarded, and I think particularly at Willowbrook that we have a situation that borders on a snake pit. and that the children live in filth.
I first heard of this big place with the pretty-sounding name because of a call I received from a member of the Willowbrook staff, a Dr. Michael Wilkins. The doctor told me he'd just been fired because he'd been urging parents with children in one of the buildings, building number 6, to organize so they could more effectively demand improved conditions for their children. The doctor invited me to see the conditions he was talking about, so unannounced and unexpected by the school administration, we toured building number 6. The doctor had warned me that it would be bad. It was horrible. This is what it looked like. This is what it sounded like, but how can I tell you about the way it smelled? It smelled of filth, it smelled of disease, and it smelled of death. How long have you been at Willowbrook?
18 years.
How long were you given physical therapy in school?
5 years.
Are you still going to school?
No,
Why?
I'm over age.
You're too old?
Yes,
Would you like to go back to school?
yes I do.
What would you want to learn if you went back to school?
Bring up my reading more.
Learn how to read.
Yeah,
How is it living on the ward that you live?
disgrace.
Is it disgrace?
Yes,
Why?
the conditions are getting worse every time they cut the budget more and more.
The Willowbrook story and the years of television follow-ups ultimately had a profound impact on the way society cares for the developmentally disabled, as you know. Not just because the old way was horrible, but also because humane, progressive alternatives existed, for example, in the form of community care, one-to-one housing, and other non-institutional models. And in selecting which was most appropriate, the most articulate advocates turned out to be the consumers themselves. That's what Bernard, in fact, does right now for a living. He works for the state of New York, keeping those politicians honest. So, buddy, first of all, how are you doing?
Okay, great.
Who are the best advocates for the developmentally disabled?
The parents and the consumers themselves.
Parents and consumers themselves. Why is that?
Because they know what they want, and they know what they need from themselves. And now they know how to make choices.
How to make choices. And the choices available far more humane, progressive than they were in your day.
Oh, yes. And they get more and more progressive.
So life's good.
Yes.
All right.
Great.
Thank you. So just as Willowbrook took more than government action alone to fix, full inclusion of people with disabilities within society must come as a result of the continued action of brave individuals like Bernard, people who don't let their disabilities stand in their way. What's also profoundly necessary is that they get the protection and advocacy efforts of agencies and organizations like your superb National Disability Rights Network. We salute you for the work you do. You are the future. And we're glad to be part of your evening tonight. For Bernard and me, thanks very much for listening.
So as I'm so grateful to the report and the start of the P&A system, and we are part of a National Disabilities Rights Network. So if you will click the next audio or video link, this is the Rooted in Rights. That gives a pretty good overview of how it's set up now.
All people deserve basic human rights. That's why Congress created a system of protection and advocacy agencies, also known as P&As, to protect and advocate for the rights of people with disabilities, because in the past, they have not been treated equally. For most of the 20th century, the phrase out of sight, out of mind was more than just a popular saying. It was the means for dealing with an unwanted segment of the population. People with disabilities were either segregated from society, locked away in institutions, or remained isolated at home with absolutely no services, not even an education. They were abused, neglected, and forgotten. Then, in 1973, ABC news cameras exposed the filthy living conditions and poor treatment inside Staten Island's Willowbrook School, which housed people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. It shocked the nation.
The doctor had warned me that it would be bad. It was horrible.
Finally, in 1975, Congress acted. They mandated that every U.S. state and territory have an official protection and advocacy agency. PNAs go by many names, but their mission is the same: to protect and advocate for the rights of people with disabilities. Together, the PNAs form the National Disability Rights Network, taking on issues affecting people with all kinds of disabilities. No other organizations have the sweeping access authority that PNAs have. They go anywhere services for people with disabilities are provided, from schools to hospitals to prisons and jails, to monitor conditions and listen to concerns. They make sure people with disabilities are treated equally, with dignity and respect, and never have to face the same kind of mistreatment they saw at Willowbrook. PNAs ask the public for input on which issues to take on in their communities. PNAs can fight against abuse and neglect in residential services, to end exploitation at work, for fair treatment in the criminal justice system, for equal access to public education and voting, for accessible communities and services and assistive technologies, and countless other issues. That's the protection and advocacy system. Click here to find the PNA for your state or territory, and subscribe for more videos from the PNA network at Rooted in Rights.
Thank you. We'll go back to our slide deck. So you can see, I think that people's perception of PNA is a little bit different depending on when they contact us and what they contact us for. And I just felt like that video kind of gives you a full scope of all of the issues and ways that we can be involved with individuals that contact us. Okay, next slide, please. So at the time that Beth and I were working on this, we had 18 employees. We're a small PNA compared to some of the other states. State agency housed within the Department of Advocacy, and our main office is in Frankfurt. We are a law practice that has both attorneys and non-attorney advocates. But everyone who's not an attorney, they have an attorney supervisor to oversee their work. And like most of you, we serve the entire Commonwealth of Kentucky and individuals of all ages and disabilities who reside within the community or in an institution. So our access authority allows us, as the Rooted in Rights video showed, you know, we have access authority in prisons and jails and psychiatric hospitals and just a variety of places. So our mission is to protect and promote the rights of Kentuckians with disabilities through legally based individual and systemic advocacy and education. Our values are listed on our PNA website, as well as being presented to you here. And it's just, you know, basic civil rights. You know, just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you know, we don't take those rights away from you. We want you integrated and in inclusive settings and with respect to differences and diversity. Anyone with a disability related question, that's okay. Anyone with a disability related question or issue can contact us. The person with a disability doesn't have to be drawing disability benefits or be a U.S. citizen. And all services are free regardless of income. This is where it kind of gets a little tricky. PNA is client directed. So even with minors, the child is the client. So for example, in an ARC meeting, if a parent said, I want Johnny to use his FM system every day, and Johnny says, I don't want to wear an FM system, our advocacy efforts are going to go toward getting what Johnny wants and not the parent. So, you know, I can speak a lot about the children and youth because that's the team that I'm on. I can tell you that I have participated in ARC meetings and went in with an advocacy goal and came out with something totally different. One time I was in an ARC meeting and the child was going to be placed inappropriately at an alternative school. And so I was working to get them back into the general ed environment. And the child said, I don't want to go back there. I want to stay in the alternative school. So in the middle of the ARC meeting, that focus switched to getting what the student wanted. And so that's where, we say we're not best interest, because Robin felt personally that it was in his best interest to be in the general ed environment, but because the client, that was not his desire, that focus had to change. Next slide. So this is just kind of the process of when you contact us. So an information and referral request is made to P&A. That can be a phone call, an email. We have an online intake form on our website. Then that request is assigned to either an advocate or an attorney. And we have pockets of people who are experts in different areas, be it education, Medicaid, issues within nursing home facilities, voting. And so based on that, I think that they assign those to the one that could answer it most appropriately. And then, but everyone supports everyone else. So if I got an INR, an information and referral about, something that I wasn't too familiar with, I know the expert in the agency to go to and discuss that with. So that's all, we're all in this together, and that's really a neat thing. The assigned P&A staffer responds to the referral source within 3 business days. And at that point, it either stays as an information referral. Let's just say they needed, they needed a number to somewhere, a quick referral, something that didn't take a lot of time. That would not be a case. It becomes a case when you get more involved and more in depth. And, I do a ton of record reviews, educational records. And we usually go 3 years back. So that's pretty extensive, tedious work to review all of those records. So it just depends on what the caller needs, and if it is a rights violation that becomes a case and matches up with our priorities. Next slide. So case acceptance, we do our priorities on a yearly basis, and we do ask for public input. But if the situation can happen to anyone with or without a disability, then it's not considered to be disability related. Next. Okay, so here is where I'm going to pass the baton off to Beth for the rest of the presentation. But not only that, I need to announce that this will be my last Kitc meeting. Beth will pick up and be the P&A representative. I want to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed being a part of this council. I have learned so much from so many of you, and have reached out and have some contacts in some areas that I may not have had I not been a part of this council. I appreciate when Luann took over and, has organized and led us in a way that has been productive. And I just appreciate everyone here and what you have brought to the council and to me personally as an advocate. So thank you all, and I'll turn it over to Beth.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, I was teasing Robin in a meeting last week, saying that I was going to tattle on her for bailing on Kitc. But it makes sense for us, since we are such a small agency, to have just one person assigned. And since I am the one who works with especially employment and in transitioning of youth, it only made sense for that to be me. And but maybe I can sweet talk Robin to attend meetings here and there if she's available. Okay, so let's talk about our agency for transition age youth. Next slide. Okay, so as you could tell from the Willowbrook video, our agent, the P&A system was created in response to abuse and neglect of those individuals who were in institutional settings. That doesn't mean that we are our frontline investigators or the people who you would immediately refer to, especially if you are a mandatory reporter. That still would be the Department for Community-Based Services. But we can do abuse neglect investigations that involve disability service providers, facilities. We've done abuse neglect within schools. And when we do the investigations, it's pretty huge. The biggest well, the most recent systemic investigation of the Supports for Community Living program that our agency did, I was part of that, and we didn't just look at one person. We looked at all of the people who were being served there. We did lots of interviews and just spent an incredible amount of time. And one thing that's very troubling is that we have found consistently, and this is for both kids and adults, that that especially if a person is a non-oral communicator, they are not interviewed by investigators, and that is something that we need to help fix, because because it's not investigated, that means that a lot of times the perpetrators go on and harm other people, and as a result, actually, of that systemic investigation, part of it was one of the first abuse neglect guilty pleas that we've had, and where it was actually upheld, and the individual was placed, the perpetrator, who was a staff member, was placed on the adult abuse registry. And I should say that this the program that we investigated has been closed, and it's, like Robin was saying, we have to make sure that everyone, regardless of disability, has a voice. Next slide, please. Okay. So on secondary and post-secondary education, like Robin was saying, we help people with the development and implementation of IEPs and 504s, including transitions, and about receiving accommodations. And, we get so many calls about special education, and parents believe that all they have to do is call us, and Robin will come riding in on her white horse with her magic wand and make everything better. And that isn't how it works. And what we do is help the parent and the student understand what their rights are and the proper process of trying to get those the needs fulfilled. Because just because it happens this one time doesn't mean that it's never going to happen again. And this way, we are giving the people the proverbial lesson on how to fish, and so that they can carry this out. Next slide, please. Okay, and Robin put some of our education resources that are on our website, and there are we have both agency publications as well as links to other entities like the like Kentucky Spin and the special ed regs and so forth. Now, our publications that we create in-house, we do have them on both IEPs and 504s. And we encourage people to download them. But if say they don't have a printer or what have you, we can most certainly send out a paper copy. Next slide, please. Okay, so, oh, if you could go back, thank you. These are the education publications that have been created in-house. It's like we have quick hit kind of things that like the tips on writing IEPs and AT, behavior intervention and so forth. And we have the larger booklets like how to negotiate in ARC meetings, which is very much like a strategy booklet for parents, and also the partners and advocacy booklet, which is it's pretty in depth. It takes all the way from the referral, well, I think my kid needs special ed, all the way through to getting the IEP, what to do if there are problems, and about transitioning. Personally, what I do whenever I've done special ed calls, which it seems like I've done a billion of them over the years, is that I always encourage parents to create a 3-ring binder to help them stay organized and with like assessments in one area, IEPs or 504s in other areas, and different tabs like that, so that you can they can just go to one place and there it is. And I've told many parents that that I actually took my own advice when my own daughter had to have a 504 plan, and I found that I wasn't being very organized, and it works. So and this way it you know, all they really have to do is grab up one thing when they go in before their meeting. Next slide. Okay. Okay, so employment, these are the areas where we are focusing on like the employment rights, concerns about possible discrimination, how to request reasonable accommodations, what are reasonable accommodations, and working while receiving benefits, because we have 2 grants. One is for the protection and advocacy for beneficiaries of Social Security, for those individuals who receive benefits. And then we also have recently the Client Assistance Program. Next slide. Okay. Housing, we don't do a whole lot with housing. We advise people about accommodations under the ADA and the Fair Housing Act, because they actually cover 2 separate areas. And we do refer out a lot for housing and other issues. Like we refer to Lexington Fair Housing Council that covers the whole state, as well as the Kentucky Human Rights Commission. Now, Commission on Human Rights. Thank you. All right, next. Okay, voting. We regularly go out and help people get registered. We have a wonderful booklet on voting rights, and we have been pretty successful in addressing barriers to the voting process for folks with disabilities. And we have worked closely actually with the U.S. Department of Justice on that. Next. Okay, so these quickly are outside of our areas of practice: non-disability related civil rights cases, divorce or child custody, we get that a lot, trust and probate matters, and that includes special needs trust. We have a list of attorneys who've told us that they do special needs trust cases. Getting benefits, SSI, SSDI, VA, workers' comp. We can't help people do that. And criminal cases, even though a situation may have been exacerbated by the person's disability, we are unable to handle criminal cases, but we regularly provide technical assistance to defense attorneys. We've also had prosecutors contact us if they have disability related questions. It's not like our office becomes co-counsel, but we serve in an advisory capacity. And because we are considered a law practice, we cannot reach out directly to private attorneys and say, hey, we were contacted by your client, blah, blah, blah. But we do have an agreement with the public defender's office so that if a family member or an individual reaches out to us, we can reach out to them and provide them with whatever information and technical assistance that they need to have. And like Robin said, basically, if a situation can happen to someone without a disability as easily as it can someone with a disability, it is not disability related. Next. And that's it. And the little caption on here is a little hard to read. It's been a rough week, but I made it. How about you?
Thank you so much, Beth. That was really informative, both Beth and Robin. And Robin, we will miss you, but we certainly understand. And we're really glad we have Beth in place.
Oh, you're in great hands with Beth. She has I think she is one of the most seasoned folks at PNA and has had many hats there. So she should be able to address a lot of things that might come up on the council as far as discussion.
What I'd like to do next for the Kitc members is, if you have questions for Beth or Robin, if you wouldn't mind to jot them down, remember them, don't forget them, put them in the chat. And we'll come back to them when we come to agency updates, because we do have Kentucky stats. Here's some contact information as I introduce our next presentation.